I hate to say it, but Biden is not being received well by a large portion of Americans, which is worrying when the only other option for who could be elected or re-elected at the end of 2024 is either Biden or Trump. Right now, Americans are convinced that our economy is in shambles and on the edge of recession. Granted, many Americans' wages and current financial situation certainly looks and feels that way. However, as it turns out, all the data is showing that Biden's reforms to the economy are resulting in significant economic growth across the country. He's actually been doing very well with the economy. Not only that, but if you were a conservative, you would not be able to deny that his measures for securing the border in regards to immigration have been even more aggressive than Trump's. He's just made it more humane in that he doesn't try to increase the death count of immigrants that are captured on the border and like kept in housing. He's like taken down the barbed wire and stuff. He's also increased domestic and foreign oil drilling permits more than any president before him, and increased green energy permits more than any president before him. So both left and right, he has done everything you could possibly imagine on a policy level to actually appease you, besides nuke Israel. He's done literally everything you could hope for that is realistically possible for a president in 2024 to do. And he's pulled some shit off I didn't even think would be possible for him to do in this day and age as a Democrat president with such a, partisan Congress and Senate, Well, unfortunately, what I've come to realize is that the median voter genuinely doesn't care whether or not the president is actually doing a good job. Because the reality of it is, their perspective on whether or not the president is doing a good job is based on who is feeding them the data. And Republicans are only hearing that the economy is bad right now. And Democrats, frankly, are not informed enough on this topic to know that Biden has been handling the economy really well right now. And that the conservative claim that the economy is fucked by Biden's handling of it, or fucked at all, really, is just not true. At least not on a broader level. Let's read this. If the economy is hot, why are voters so frustrated? Rarely has Washington stumbled on an issue more confounding than President Biden's low approval ratings. Among those traveling the corridors of power, you'd sooner see a confident assessment of Jimmy Hoffa's whereabouts than a clear explanation of the public's dissatisfaction. The economy appears to be humming. The stock market is hitting record highs. The unemployment rate is near an all-time low. Wages are rising faster than inflation, and inflation has finally cooled. What more must a president do to win over the public? Unfortunately, the variety of explanations bandied about, that prices remain high, that misinformation prevails, that we're caught in a post-pandemic funk, overlook what is likely the core of today's problem. The president has done a great deal to improve the economy, championing investments in infrastructure, bringing manufacturing jobs back stateside, and pointing us towards what we all hope will be a soft landing. But he has the misfortune of presiding over a country that has undergone at least a quarter century of economic carnage from middle and low-income America. Until recently, however, the extent was shrouded by economic statistics. To be fair, the economy has improved considerably since Biden took office, but as research by my colleagues at the Ludwig Institute for Shared Economic Prosperity, or LISEP, has recently revealed, those improvements come at the tail end of a quarter century that has been almost uniformly disastrous for the working and middle classes. Most Americans, raised to believe that each generation is supposed to do a bit better than the one before, increasingly have come to feel vulnerable to downward mobility, and the resulting frustration haunts the president's approval ratings. Take as an example the nation's headline unemployment rate, down from 10% at the height of the Great Recession to below 4% today. That's crazy. Biden has gotten unemployment down below 4%. If you add those who are earning a poverty wage or subsisting in a part-time gig while preferring a full-time job to the universe of the unemployed, the actual figure is more than 22%, though. More than one of every 5 workers. That may be down dramatically from where it was. Indeed, to the president's credit, it's the best it's been in nearly 30 years. But that may not be satisfying to someone struggling to maintain their childhood standard of living or worse. That's true. Biden is growing the economy, but it's still so fucked that when 1 in 5 workers is facing poverty, that's a lot of Americans who are either themselves experiencing a bad economy in their world or know people experiencing it rough, and that is influencing their opinion on the economy, even if they themselves aren't getting it too badly. Or consider what Americans are earning. To look at prevailing wage statistics, the median today sits at more than $58,000 a year. But if you include workers excluded from that measure, those working part-time and those who are unemployed, and the number comes down to 50,000, a meaningful difference for the median income worker. Even more painful, during the early 1980s, the gap separating those in the top 10% and bottom 25% of earners was less than $70,000 in 2023 money. It's now nearly $100,000. Finally, conventional wisdom in Washington has long held that prices hikes were modest between the 1980s and the post-pandemic inflation crisis, but the Consumer Price Index, CPI, inadvertently hides the reality that prices on items that most families can't avoid, necessities including eggs and healthcare premiums, rose more aggressively than the prices for luxury items like yachts and second homes, even before COVID. This is basically saying that right now, if you are well off or wealthy and you can afford the increased prices on necessities right now, pretty much all luxury items are cheaper than they've ever been. If you want to buy a graphics card, cheaper than it's ever been. A cruise, cheaper than it's ever been. A flight vacation, cheaper than it's ever been. Luxury things across the board are cheaper than they've ever been right now, but still there is quite significant inflation on food, on gas, although Biden's brought gas prices down a lot. They're not down to pre-COVID. They're not down to what they were before COVID, which was when Trump was president, and so people think when Trump was president, gas prices were lower, food prices were lower, inflation was lower, and inflation doesn't stop. This is one of the most unfortunate things. People think that deflation is a thing that happens. It's not a thing. There's no such thing as deflation. It's never happened. It will never happen. There is no economic deflation in the American economy. Inflation can stop, it can slow, it can never reverse. And so many people think that it does deflate, or it should be deflating, or deflation should be happening. Like there should be a reverse of inflation happening to the economy and the US dollar. That's just not a thing. That's not an actual, like that not happening is not a sign that things are going badly. But Americans are not very well versed in economics. If they think inflation is bad, so deflation of the US dollar would be a good thing, right? Like, hey, we should go back to the gold standard and make it so a hamburger costs 13 cents again. Now, why did food used to be so cheap, and why has it gotten progressively more expensive as time goes by? COVID is a big part of it. Shrinkflation is another big part of it as well, where despite the slight increase in prices to our food, the portions are getting smaller and smaller and smaller over time, and imperceptibly so. Like you aren't even noticing it, but it's happening. Besides that, I really think it has to do with the fact that after World War II, we saw a massive boom in agriculture. The baby boom meant tons of young men that could farm, or tons of young men that could work in factories to make equipment for farming. And so we went from tons of young men who had just gotten out of like fighting age, who are fighting age, farming, to young men making machines for farming. And all of a sudden, we're producing more food than we have ever produced ever before. And we've got like a shit ton of it. And other countries are buying it because they got bombed out by the war. And we were one of the few countries that, didn't have any bombs fall on our soil by the enemy during the war. So we've got like unspoiled agriculture. And so not only did we have plenty of food for us, but we were selling food in mass to other countries that were starving and needed it. So we were inflating the prices to sell them, which meant that we were living in a time where America was truly the top of the world. American exceptionalism was born post-World War II, when America was, the stars aligned for it to be in the right place, right time, to be the most prosperous country for like 30 years. But then, the rest of the world kind of bounced back from things. Manufacturing started to build up overseas, is a big part of it. And America hasn't been quite on top the same way it was back in the 1950s ever since. And Americans think we can go back to that. We can't go back to exactly that. We have to go forward to something new. That is the only way to reach a level of happiness as what you perceive was present back then. Between 2001 and 2019, CPI rose less than 45%. The true cost of living climbed nearly 65%. And over the past 18 months, basic family necessities have become even more expensive, even if that growth has stabilized. None of this is to deny that much has improved during Biden's tenure, thanks in large part to the administration's agenda. But the fundamental misperception in Washington is that the public's present frustration is born from their reaction to what's happened since 2021. That it could be changed if the president just tweaked this one policy or another, when in fact it reflects a longer-term reality. The White House is trying to stabilize and improve an economy that hasn't worked for huge swaths of the population for decades. For understandable reasons, many believe they have more to gain from seeing it fundamentally deconstructed. If that helps to explain Biden's public approval challenge, it also points to what is likely to be a better campaign strategy. Rather than bragging about the president's economic accomplishments as though their effects can already be felt, the campaign needs to explain how the administration has laid a foundation for an economic resurrection. Victory laps about Bidenomics simply don't hit when voters remain beleaguered, when voters feel beleaguered by housing and grocery prices. The president, famous for his ability to empathize, needs to apply that superpower here, illustrating that he understands their plight and explain how he is sowing the seeds for greater prosperity and upward mobility both over the next 4 years and further down the line. I hate to say it, guys, but right now, based on the polling, if the election happened today, the polling says that Trump would win pretty strongly. And the sad thing to say is, it's because a ton of people who think Biden is doing a bad job don't know about this data and are just not going to vote for him because they think he was a dud and they just don't care what happens next. At least Trump will be entertaining. Listen, guys, the only thing that's going to stop this political apathy from the left, these low approval ratings for Biden, is going to be people who know this stuff explaining to his voter base the truth, the reality of the situation. That while things aren't perfect, Biden has done more than any other president before him to set the foundations for an economic golden age in America unlike anything we've ever seen before. He has made unprecedented moves to improve the U.S. economy that will stretch way into the future if they continue to be built upon and worked upon. And he isn't cut off after 4 unceremonious years. If you want to do this, if you want to help, then consider clicking the link down below in the description of my videos and join with Progressive Victory. You can join up with their canvassing operations, you can join up with their phone banking. They've got all sorts of things that you can do to help get Republican politicians out of power and Democratic politicians into power. The Republicans need as much local, statewide, and federal support as possible if they're going to literally decimate our democracy in 2025. So if you want to help fight them and help do your small part to decrease the chances of a Republican presidency in 2024, then please consider clicking that link, volunteer with Progressive Victory, and they'll have something for you to do.